you ever feel like you're holding on too tightly to things you can't control? This story may change the way you see life. In the quiet countryside of England, where rolling green fields stretched endlessly under the sky, there lived a man named Edward. He was a respected farmer, known for his hard work and dedication. However, beneath his sturdy exterior, Edward carried a weight that no one could see. For years, he had built his farm with his own hands, plowing the land, tending to the animals, and ensuring that his crops flourished. The farm was not just a source of livelihood. It was his identity, his pride, and his legacy. As time passed, however, the world around him began to change. Younger farmers embraced modern machines, while Edward continued to rely on traditional methods. Profits dwindled, and the farm that was once full of life now seemed to resist his efforts. Edward refused to accept these changes. He worked longer hours and pushed himself harder, but the more he tried to control everything, the more it slipped through his fingers. One day, after a particularly difficult season during which a storm had destroyed half his crops, Edward sat outside his farmhouse, staring at the broken fence and the flooded fields. His hands, once strong, now trembled with exhaustion. His heart ached, not just from the loss of crops, but from the overwhelming realization that, despite all his efforts, he could not stop the inevitable. At that moment, an old friend, Father Benjamin, arrived. The village monk, dressed in simple robes, had always been a quiet observer of life. He sat beside Edward without speaking, simply watching the clouds drift across the sky. After a long silence, Father Benjamin finally said, "Edward, why do you grip the sand so tightly?" Edward looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" The monk reached down, scooped up a handful of sand, and held it in his open palm. The grains rested peacefully in his hand. Then he clenched his fist, tightening his grip. The sand slipped through his fingers, scattering in the wind. "The tighter you hold on," Father Benjamin said, "the more you lose." Edward's throat tightened as he looked back at his fields, his farm, and his life. He had spent so many years trying to control everything, afraid to let go of what he had built. Yet, in doing so, he had lost the joy of the work, the love for the land, and the peace that once came from simply tending to his farm. That night, Edward lay awake, staring at the wooden beams of his bedroom ceiling. He thought about his father, who had once taught him how to plant his first seeds. He thought about his wife, Margaret, who had always reminded him to enjoy the beauty of the seasons. He reflected on the years he had spent fighting against change, resisting the natural flow of life. The next morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Edward made a decision. He would no longer fight against what he could not control. Instead of mourning the loss of his crops, he replanted without resentment. Instead of comparing himself to younger farmers, he embraced what he knew best: patience, care, and love for the land. He started mentoring young men who wanted to learn the old ways, teaching them the rhythm of the seasons, the feel of the soil, and the wisdom that comes with time. Something remarkable happened. The more he let go of control, the more life seemed to flow effortlessly. His farm, though not the most modern, became a place of learning where experience and tradition met innovation. His heart, once heavy with worry, became light with acceptance. One day, as Edward sat on his porch, watching the sun set behind the hills, a young farmer named Thomas came to visit him. "Master Edward," Thomas said hesitantly, "I have been struggling. No matter how hard I work, things don't always go as planned, and I feel like I am failing." Edward smiled, remembering his own struggles. He picked up a fallen leaf and handed it to the young man. "Do you know why this leaf falls, Thomas?" Edward asked. Thomas shook his head. "Because the tree does not fight the wind. It knows when to hold on and when to let go." Thomas looked at the leaf, deep in thought. Edward continued, "You will never control everything. The seasons will change, storms will come, and crops will fail. But if you learn to let go of what you cannot change, you will find peace. In that peace, you will see new possibilities." Years passed, and Edward's farm became known not for its size or wealth, but for the wisdom it offered. People came not just to buy crops, but also to seek guidance. Edward had learned the greatest lesson of all: not everything is meant to be held on to. Some things must be released so that new growth can begin. So, what about you? Are you holding on too tightly to something in your life? Maybe it's time to let go. True peace comes not from control, but from acceptance. When we trust that we are okay, regardless of the circumstances that arise, we don't need to micromanage the universe. We can let go and open ourselves to a range of wonderful possibilities that are not accessible when we cling to just one right path. To surrender means to stop fighting, stop battling with yourself, stop opposing the universe, and stop resisting the natural flow of life. It's about accepting reality rather than pushing against it. Surrendering does not mean inaction. Rather, it involves taking action from a place of surrendering energy. If letting go of control and surrendering not only feels better, but also yields better results, then how do we achieve that? Sometimes it's as simple as recognizing when you are in control mode and consciously choosing to let go, deliberately shifting into a state of surrender. The art of letting go focuses on clearing the clutter in our minds. It emphasizes the importance of not dwelling on the past or obsessing over a future that may never come, though this can be easier said than done. The process involves learning to trust that everything will be okay, managing your self-talk, and transforming your internal perspective on the world. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.